From getting Finn in trouble with cosmic beings to being as irresponsible as humanly possible, Fionna Campbell has a lot of interesting moments in Fionna and Cake. But one episode in particular that was actually pretty recent really butchered her character for a lot of people. This episode was so controversial to the point where it severely divided the Fionna and Cake fanbase, with people either hating Fionna to death or taking a more humanizing approach. There's a lot to talk about here, and I kind of want to sit down with you guys and just give my thoughts. Like, subscribe, comment, everything is literally free. Let's begin. As you guys could probably guess, the episode in question is Season 2, Episode 8, The Insect That Sang. This is inherently a very important episode as it places us generally near the end of Season 2, right as the goal of saving the sweet spot has been accomplished. Now, until this point, everyone in the narrative has been working their butts off to make this happen, especially Fionna. Ever since the conflict started way back when at the start of the season, she's been an incredibly proactive figure in the whole entire thing, coming up with the fundraiser idea, recruiting DJ Flame, finding a venue. She has been trying her best with what little she has, and it's very important to acknowledge that. However, by forces completely out of her control, she ends up missing the whole entire fundraiser. So ultimately, Gary, Marshall Lee, DJ Flame, and Cake are forced to do it without her, and thanks to some phenomenal performances, it ends up being a complete and utter success. So despite all her efforts, Fionna ultimately wasn't even a part of the whole entire thing. She didn't get to hear Marshall Lee's song, she didn't get to help troubleshoot, and considering her proactive role, that is absolutely heartbreaking, but that's just the start. Or rather, it's the buildup. After this, she gets caught kissing DJ Flame, who's now dating Fennell, so I guess that's technically the start, but you get it. What happens next is what really underscored the often poor writing and decision making of the season that people had gradually started complaining more and more about. In a fit of sadness that I can only imagine culminated in a feeling of betrayal and maybe even inferiority, Fionna finds herself at the now vacant sweet spot. This is the place of her best friend's dreams, and also pretty important to note, where her best friend's boyfriend currently lives. While looking at the sweet spot that they now technically own, that lingering feeling of betrayal escalates into anger as Fionna impulsively destroys the sweet spot with a bulldozer. Now, to play devil's advocate here, it didn't seem like she really intended to go through with it, but to play objective, she did still destroy stuff, even if it initially was just minor things. Now, I guess we can just start with saying what needs to be said. This is, by every stretch of the imagination, excessive. We can hopefully all agree on that, right? I'm not sure if the writers think this is how people who feel betrayed act, but TLDR, it isn't. At least, I hope not. Even though she was 100% rightfully hurt, this is not just hurt behavior, this is seriously concerning behavior. A lot of people try to write this off with the perspective that Fionna is a character that's meant to be flawed, and to a certain degree, I agree with that statement. That is the crux of her character that she has always been, literally since our first time seeing her in the new Fionna world. Fionna wouldn't be Fionna if she wasn't flawed. But at the same time, I really would just like to counter-argue that by saying that, again, using the idea that this is flawed behavior so it's okay just does not work in any world. Let's take a look at some portrayals of flawed behavior in media just to, get another picture. First example off the top of my head, look at the Owl House. We covered that recently. Lilith is an incredibly flawed character. She literally cursed her sister for all of eternity in pursuit of personal gains. It doesn't get much worse than that. But her redemption consisted of splitting that curse and literally living the rest of her life in guilt as proof of her evolution. The very same thing she dished out was ultimately the very same thing that she was forced to endure. In contrast, I think you can see that this, at best, is just incredibly unrealistic and unfitting, and at worst, is just extremely poorly written. But the thing that I think turns a lot of people off is that this just was not a turning point for Fionna like you'd expect. She gets literally no redemption arc. I mean, how would you even make a redemption arc out of this? You just can't, right? Things like this disillusion the audience, and In turn, all it does is paint Fiona in an incredibly bad and arguably irredeemable light. And let me be clear, right? I think it's okay if you want your main character at one point to disillusion the audience. That's actually one of my favorite tropes in literally all of media. I love a good character redemption arc. I love flawed characters who grow. But in Fiona's case, there is no redemption arc. You just destroyed two people's lives essentially on a whim. These aren't strangers either. These are your best friends, or they're supposed to be your best friends. There's nothing you can do besides right your wrongs. And even then, the damage is already done. You don't simply just look flawed anymore. You look poorly written and poorly executed. This is just my interpretation of what may have happened this episode, but I genuinely do feel like the writers wanted to give Fiona something big before the season came to a close. Or at the very least, something to use going forward in a potential season 3 to inspire change or growth. Something to add to her character and elevate her from flawed protagonist to someone who has made mistakes and learned. Where we got lost along the way, I genuinely cannot tell you. The story also does this really weird thing where everyone forgives Fiona for some reason. Like, though Gary and Marshall Lee are noticeably upset, this turns into a everyone has problems deal. And for some reason, Fennell and Fiona are also magically friends again as well, after she was caught making out with her ex-boyfriend. You want to know something incredibly ironic that we just talked about not too long ago? In Adventure Time, when Finn messes up with FP, he learns for the first time that saying sorry is not enough. The only way things in the context of that relationship mend is by taking an extended period of time to recognize those faults and grow. This isn't an isolated event in the case of Finn. This is a universal truth in growing up. Apologies don't always fix everything. I just found it incredibly strange how the predecessor story shows a much more nuanced approach at this as opposed to what we see here. And to me, it feels like the story wanted this, I want to say, breakdown with real narrative weight, but it doesn't want real narrative consequences, real weighted consequences. That's what it feels like to me at the very least. Because I want to say this, I think Fiona's breakdown here was very real. Despite me kind of, I don't want to say attacking it, despite me being critical of it, I still think it was very real, and I think that if you tie that back to some things she's had to go through throughout this series and even before this series, it makes, you can draw some connection there, right? You can draw some connection. But it loses like literally all fluidity after these things happen, you know? I think it would have been much more impactful if one of the characters went, "Hey, Fiona, we see you're trying, but that's just not enough." It would add much more weight, and furthermore, it would make the scene feel like, you know, Fiona stepped into a point of no return, but going forward, she can continue bettering herself until ultimately she reaches a point where everyone can potentially be friends again, you know? All that to say that none of this was very realistic, and it feels like the story tries to make amends for the prior episode in the best way it can with what little time it has left. With only 2 episodes and roughly less than 40 minutes of screen time left, the only way to do that is to have the characters forgive Fiona pretty quickly. And more than anything, I'm just left wondering why they forced themselves into that time constraint to begin with. I think that if they wanted to give Fiona some meaningful arc, they should not have forced it. I mean, let's be real here. Trying to inject something like this into episode 8 when the seasons only have 10 episodes makes literally no sense in the slightest. You have less than 40 minutes to reconstruct the character. Like, imagine Finn and FP broke up in season 2 episode 19 and then make amends again in season 2 episode 21. And then we get episodes like Rat Bear and the like. There's literally no journey, nothing to say, "Hey, things are different now." It makes no goddamn sense. And I think that's why it really was just negligence that highlighted a trend of weird and inconsistent writing all throughout the entire season. All of this to say that the episode was incredibly perplexing, and again, I think it points towards a bigger picture. You know, all these people aren't making videos saying Fionna and Cake season 2 was bad for no reason. I think they're saying that for a very grounded reason in this scene. I think it's kind of a testament to everything that everyone is feeling post Fionna and Cake season 2. Like, being completely honest here, the finale in tandem with Huntress Wizard literally saved this entire season. Anyways, I think we're getting a little off track here. Let's wrap things up. While I don't dislike Fionna and Cake Season 2, and especially not Fiona herself, love her. In future seasons, if this story continues, I think we need to spend more time understanding the way we're exploring characters and when we are exploring characters. That said, the story still has a lot of potential. I really do think that. A mediocre episode does not overwrite that. It really just falls down to taking the endless criticism to the chest and improving. These people showed something really good with Season 1. They showed something good with the end of Season 2. This isn't a Stranger Things case where the writers have forgotten how to write somehow. No. They were just stumbling this season, and that's okay. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to drop your thoughts on any section down below at any moment. Subscribe, like, all that stuff. It's been Jax, and I'll catch you all next time.